General quarters. All hands man your battle stations.
Welcome to Wetsu, a Battleship New Jersey podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Spevak, CEO and Executive Director of the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today's episode is brought to you by ELAC 825, the labor employer cooperative of Operating Engineers Local 825, whose skilled members were instrumental in the recent dry docking of America's most decorated battleship. We're honored to welcome an extraordinary guest and true champion of our military heritage, Brigadier General Yvonne L, the Adjutant General of New Jersey and Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. As New Jersey's highest-ranking military official, General Mays commands more than 8,400 soldiers and airmen of the New Jersey Army and Air National Guard, leading them in executing both federal and state missions. She also oversees the full spectrum of veterans programs, commissions, and facilities, ensuring that those who serve are honored, supported, and remembered. General Mays began her distinguished military career in 1983 as an enlisted airman in the U.S. Air Force, where she contributed to pivotal operations, including Operation Just Cause and Operation Desert Storm. After earning her commission in 1999, she steadily rose to the ranks, taking on critical leadership roles in the 177th Fighter Wing, Director of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air National Guard, and Deputy Joint Task Force Commander for New Jersey's COVID-19 response. Prior to her current posting, she served as Deputy Adjutant General. In July 2024, Governor Murphy appointed her as Acting Adjutant General, and just a few months later, the New Jersey Senate confirmed her and promoted her to Brigadier General, a historic milestone that made her the first Black woman in New Jersey history to serve as Adjutant General. Her dedication to honoring service and preserving our military legacy has been deeply felt here at the Battleship. From participating in our March 2024 departure ceremony to visiting the battleship during dry dock, General Mays has stood alongside us in stewardship and celebration of our military heritage. Under her leadership, DMAVA also played a key role in supporting the commissioning of our sister ship, the USS New Jersey, SSN 796, forging a living connection between New Jersey's military past and its future. General Mays, welcome back aboard. We're thrilled to have you on this edition of the Wetsu podcast.
Thank you, Marshall. Great to be here today.
You actually have the honor of being the first non-Navy person on our podcast. So normally my first question is, why did you join the Navy? But let me amend that ever so slightly to ask you why you joined the Air Force.
I joined the Air Force. One, I come from a military family. My uncles all served in the Navy. My father served in the Army, and I made the decision to serve in the Air Force. And one, to continue that legacy of service for my family, but also to pay for college. I think not wanting to place that financial burden on my parents, and I wasn't just sharp enough to get scholarships. And so I thought the military would be a great way to learn a skill and pay for college. My intent was to stay for 4 years and get out and go to college. And here I am, almost 43.
And so in many cases, your story is no different than many others who are joining the Guard in that same capacity.
Yes, for sure.
You've had many roles in uniform, including several at the 177th Fighter Wing down at Atlantic City International Airport. At the one, you served in a variety of roles, including as Mission Support Group Commander. Just throughout my career, I've been privileged to have visited the 177th on several occasions for tours and behind-the-scenes briefings. It's a critical base of operations for protecting our eastern seaboard. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at the Fighter Wing and the role that they play in our state and national defense?
Absolutely. And the 177th Fighter Wing, it is critical to our nation's defense. And I'm not sure I truly understood that in 1999 when I went there. But it was made clear to me on September 11th, 2001. I remember, just as probably a lot of us do, just where we were in that moment that those airplanes hit the World Trade Center. I was at work that day, and I didn't go home that day, not until late in the evening. And and that's when I realized that, just the role that the 177th played. Our jets were some of the first to be in the sky that on that day, September 11th, 2001, and just making sure that the pilots and our maintainers, that they converted to be in the proper status to do that mission, to make sure their pay and benefits everything was in order for that. And then just to see the base transition in a moment's notice from our day-to-day lives to a critical combat role. And we stayed in that posture for the next year. And we've actually been flying alert since then. And so I think in 2001, I realized that, just what it means and what the airmen at that base do day in and day out. And then as we progressed, working with our congressionals, Congressman Loviando at the time, understanding the significance of our base, the significance of the mission of sitting 24/7 alert, ensured that we received the funding to build new hangars to sit alert and to make sure that those hangars not only house the F-16, but anything that would be in the inventory in the out years. And so there's a lot of history at the base. There's a lot of interesting things to see. And it's cool to see the F-16s flying, but no kidding, those folks are sitting, they're in the blink of an eye, it all changes and they get right to business. And so I couldn't be more proud to say that I've been affiliated with that base.
Yeah. Oh, on my last visit there, we brought several sailors from the submarine New Jersey. And had a really great visit, meeting with some of the F-16 pilots. And it was just interesting in the sky versus below the sea conversations that were going on there. You mentioned, needing the critical funding for the base. Just in the last year, over $7 million was secured in military construction funds. I remember back when I worked in the legislature for the legislators representing Atlantic City, there was over $10 million in MILCOM money to try to build these next generation, hangars to fit the next generation fighters. Is that something that still might be in the cards for the base in the future?
Yes, we certainly hope so. We're working with our congressionals now, Congressman Van Drew and Congressman Norcross, to ensure that the 187th has a follow-on fighter. Currently, they're flying some of the oldest in the inventory. We always joke, many of the pilots are younger than the airplanes that they are flying. And, but still they do a critical mission. And the funding for the alert hangars was critical to keeping us relevant. The $7 million to reconstruct the gate, the entryway, will allow our force protection, allow the defenders down there to provide force protection to the base and all that it houses there. And in addition to that funding, the congressionals are working to upgrade our hangars, upgrade the mission training centers, as well as a facility. It's a dining facility, but also a gym and things like that. And so millions of dollars of construction to upgrade the infrastructure of that base for the airmen that serve there. And I'm hopeful and confident that will come through. The team down there is doing a great job.
Well, the visit I just mentioned, it was the day after the air show.
Really?
And we got to see the Air Force Thunderbirds taxiing out and taking off to head back to wherever the next air show that they were doing, which was a really cool thing to witness. So a lot of great stuff down at the 187th. And even down, having worked in Atlantic County for many years, I mean, so many people don't realize what exactly goes on at that base and the importance of it. So I'm glad we were able to talk about it. Switching over to another base in New Jersey, after many years, the 108th Air Wing out of the Joint Base McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst is now home to the KC-40 refueling tanker, which replaced the KC-135. It took a long time to get that mission here, from congressional approval to then actually getting the planes here. How will that impact the Air Guard at the Joint Base, and how will it impact future missions there?
For us at the 108 means, the KC-135 going away means we no longer have those airplanes on our ramp, which has been, it's been a significant emotional event for all of us, because that's, to not have your weapon system, is, it's a pretty big deal. But for the 108, they are paving the way for this classic embedded associate construct. And we're the first of its kind in between the Air Force and the reserve component. And it has not been easy, but the airmen on the ground are working through the issues and challenges, and for us, we don't own the aircraft. However, our maintainers and our pilots, all of that support is embedded with the active duty, the 305th, and to keep those airplanes flying no matter what the crew looks like. And so we could be an all guard crew, it could be a mix, so managing the day to day on that is, it's personality driven, all of those things, but I'm confident that they are working through it. And then the leadership, the wing commander there, Colonel Shadows, who just came on board, he came out of Air Mobility Command. And so we're hoping that in addition to all that he brings, the relationships with the folks at Air Mobility Command will help us as we, define what this will look like for us now and in the future. It's all kind of liken it to what, you have to ask dad for the keys to the car, when you don't own the aircraft. So it takes between the wing commander, the operations group commander to manage those relationships with the 305th. And like I said, they're doing a great job, but we're navigating this. It's new territory. But I am confident that we will make it because I think that the expertise that we bring and we're an older force in the Guard. And so those maintainers working on those airplanes combined with the active duty, how they come in and they PCS in and out, and we're kind of the stability. And so I think we offer something that you just don't get because of the way the active duty is and how they move through. And as we go through, we'll learn those things and then capture those synergies to accomplish the mission, because it is a no-fail mission. And I think our airmen get that. So our ultimate goal was to see iron back on our ramp. We're very realistic, and we focus on the day. But we'll get there.
Just a few weeks ago, the 225th Cyber Operations Squadron at the 108th was activated at McGuire. Significant expansion of the Guard's cyber capabilities. How does this new unit reflect the sort of evolving role of the National Guard in defending us from modern cyber warfare threats?
Yes. So that is another thing with the new mission we are encouraged by. So having a second cyber squadron is a huge deal for us. We also our ASOS, we lost that mission at the 177. And we were concerned about that. But as things are evolving and understanding what we will need for, future engagements, it's this cyber defense and cyber protection. And so having this second squadron, it just increases our ability to support the state and federal missions that will come our way. And, I just put in a shameless plug, with, cyber, we know through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the need for cyber jobs out in the civilian community are going to increase by 32% by 2030. And so people going into that field who would want to go into that field, they can serve in the Guard part-time and have a job out in the community. In fact, that's where I think at least a part of our airmen come from. They're part-timers, and they're working somewhere else for another company, big jobs in cybersecurity, and then they come and they work at the base. And so it is a dual purpose mission in many ways, in that we can help them get the skills that they need. We can help them hone those skills. And then they all bring to us from their specific fields.
Yeah.
They bring that to the Guard and to the military. And so we're so excited, and our recruiters are recruiting to that mission right now. And so for anyone interested in even stepping into that field, going through the military, one, they get you a lot of training that costs a lot of money in the civilian sector. And then two, having a military background, employers, they respect the fact that you're in the military and all of those other skills that you get. So it gives you kind of a leg up on the competition out in the civilian sector.
Absolutely. There's certainly no doubt that the next era of warfare is cyber. I mean, it's in everything we do. It's unavoidable at this point.
Absolutely.
So really, really great to see that, we're expanding our capabilities here in New Jersey. The Joint Base, again, the part of this podcast is to highlight what we're not just the battleship and folks associated with the battleship, but our military leadership here in New Jersey and the different bases and commands that we have here. And obviously the Joint Base, one of the biggest bases in the whole country, falls in our state. You've got Army, you've got Air Force, you've got the Navy there. What's it like just to have that, sort of huge component here living in our state, and obviously having the Guard so integrated into it.
It is, it's almost, too much for me to conceive sometimes. And I'll tell you, part of it is because 1983, McGuire was my first station, my first duty station. So I came out of technical school and worked at the passenger terminal in McGuire as an enlisted airman at E1, never ever thinking that I would have the opportunity, one, to come back here when I left, but two, in the capacity that I'm in now, and able to shape the environment and shape the conditions in which people serve. And so through my relationships with the leadership at the Joint Base, and from what I do in the National Guard, it's a little bit surreal, but also it reminds me of the great responsibility that I have to make our organization the best that it can be. Because when I think back to my younger self, how young and how much I didn't know and how much I had to rely on those who were in charge. And I've ran into all kinds of leaders throughout my career, and to make sure that people who have this responsibility at every level, that if you're not in it to take care of the people who do the work, then this is probably not the thing for you. And I'm grateful and thankful that I can affect that change, within our organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably apples to oranges here. In a similar way, I remember coming here to this battleship as a kid with my dad. And in fact, I was at my parents' house over the weekend, and there's a picture of me, probably, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 years old here, standing out on the deck. You just never expect to come back and be running the place in a similar way. So it's always interesting where life takes us, and certainly for full circle for you on many occasions here in New Jersey. In July 2024, Governor Phil Murphy nominated you to become our next Adjutant General and our Commissioner of the Department of Military Veterans Affairs. I often like to ask guests, do they remember sort of where they were, what they were doing when they got that call about receiving their, the major commander? And in most of the cases is command of the battleship or a command of the submarine or something more Navy related. But do you recall sort of how you learned that the governor had selected you as our next Adjutant General?
Yes, I was in a meeting with then General Howe. She knew about it, but I didn't know he was going to call. So we were in a meeting, tag meeting. She has all the commanders come in, and my phone rang, and I looked, and I looked down at my phone, and it had Governor Murphy. And of course I popped up out of my seat and like scurried out of the room, because you don't want, that's not a call you miss. And even in seeing that, I didn't expect to hear his voice when I said hello. I thought it would be someone else, and it was him. So and he offered me the position, and I was telling him how honored I was, and to accept it. He said, "Does that mean, so do you accept the position?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." And so it was, you just stumbling over your words, and but yes, that is a day I will never forget.
You actually have you have two jobs, as I mentioned, as our Adjutant General, but also as our Commissioner of the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. So let's just first start by talking about your role as Adjutant General. As I mentioned, over 8,400 citizen soldiers and airmen of the New Jersey National Guard. And the National Guard obviously has a sort of unique dual mission. How do you balance the demands of the federal missions, and as well as, your state responsibilities and the Guard's state responsibilities?
Yeah. So it takes a whole team of people to keep me on track. But with the federal side, I do have my Assistant Adjutant General Army and the Assistant Adjutant General Air, who help me to execute on, any type of mandate, whether it's coming from Governor Murphy for state missions, or, from the federal side through the DOD and NGB. So they help me out with that. And so my biggest challenge, I think, is to communicate my intent to the other general officers, and also the director of the Joint Staff. Communicate my intent to them on my expectation on how we run our organization, the type of environment that we want to create, an environment where we enforce standards, that we lead from the front in that area. Also in treating people well, no matter what the situation, and an organization where moms and dads can feel confident that their sons and daughters are in good, capable hands. And so my job in the military side, I think, is easier in many respects than my responsibilities as the commissioner, being responsible for the care of our veterans and our veterans homes, and then our 2 transitional housing facilities for veterans who have fallen on hard times, because we're dealing with a population in both of those areas. One, they are people who are in need. They're also people who have taken off the uniform. In that space, there are so many other stakeholders who are interested in what we do. So trying to communicate and tell the good story of the good work that people do in very tough environments. With the homes, it's an elderly population, and that it is tough work to do. But I believe that our caregivers that work in those homes are some of the finest on the planet. It is not an easy job. And if anybody has, elderly parents or grandparents and trying to care for them, they understand what that takes. And so just making sure, because it changes day to day, sometimes hour to hour. And their conditions are so fragile. And I say and that makes it harder. I'm on the other side with the military. You're dealing with, 8,400 pretty much young people.
Yeah.
Who are, who can take care of themselves and give back, don't rely on you for every single thing. And so in that way, it's more difficult, because I think it is just dealing with the population who is in need. We are their advocates. But it is, again, it is not a responsibility that I take lightly. And I have every day, I'm thankful. And I also think of, how can I do it better? What can we do better? And then, having a DCBA, Vincent Salamino, I don't think you find a better person to advocate for our veterans, in any of those facilities. So we have a great team. I wish I could take credit for putting it together, but General Howe, as she selected people for the team that we have, she absolutely put the right people in right place, right time.
In recent years, Guard units have responded from everything from being a part of the COVID response to overseas deployments. How do you maintain readiness across such a diverse set of missions? And I was on my computer earlier today, and I was on Facebook, and it reminded me that today is the 5-year anniversary of the 177th and the 108th flyover that happened during the lockdown, as that sort of goodwill gesture of getting outside your house and watching the airplanes in the sky. How do you maintain that sort of readiness?
So through it, it's not easy, especially in the Guard, because you would say we have 39 days a year to do training,
Right.
like for any of those missions, those 39 days set aside, but then you lay in all the other things that you have to do, especially being the Guard and being affiliated with the community, because that is a part of our service, to be present in our community and help. But reminding our soldiers and airmen, whether it's a state mission or a federal mission, when they go and do those things, they see the impact that they make. They see that they bring to, whether it's people overseas or if it's people right in their neighborhoods, that they bring hope. If a person in a uniform shows up, they don't care where you're from. They don't care if you're active, Guard, reserve. They know when they see any combination of this uniform that it's going to be okay. And I think that's a very powerful feeling for people. And I think especially for our young folks who want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, they want to make an impact. And that's what we see in this generation. And when they see the impact that they have by being affiliated with the military, I think that is one part of why they continue. I wish I could make it easier on our traditional guardsmen who they work full-time jobs. They come and they do these missions, then they go back to work. And so it's tough. And I think our biggest job is to make sure, again, that our environments are inclusive, that we know our jobs as commanders, and that we're doing all that we can to remove hurdles and obstacles to serving so that they can come in and do their jobs. But I'm always impressed and amazed by the young people. You can get discouraged if you look at some things, but it always brings me back to say, you know what, we're in good hands.
As Adjutant General, you've overseen the highest operational tempo in the history of the New Jersey National Guard. Just recently, over 1,500 guardsmen from the 44th Combat Infantry Brigade deployed to Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait in support of U.S. Central Command, and just a few weeks ago, they returned home. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work that our Guard here in New Jersey is doing, not just here in the state, but around the world?
So they came back. They came back at the end of December, beginning of the year. When they come back to the States, they go to Texas to reintegrate, then they get home. But while they were deployed, they were in some of the most dangerous parts of the world. And I know many people saw on TV the one drone strike where it's a bigger drone that came in, and it took out a building. It was one of the facilities that our New Jersey Guardsmen were operating out of. And so to see that on TV, to see the destruction of it, we received briefs and, we saw the footage of it, and we had some soldiers get hurt, but nobody perished. And thankfully, yes. And it could have been a very different story had they not gotten out sooner. And so I think when I think about that, and I think about the servicemen who are in harm's way even right now, and many who don't have that good news story, but here, you have from younger people to people who deployed multiple times in that environment. It's very sobering. One of the things I said while they were deployed, if they can do that, we can do this here at home, whatever it was, how ridiculous we thought it was or how uncomfortable. But if they could serve in that way, we could do whatever it takes. And I still believe that. We will send our 42nd Regional Support Group. They will deploy later this year to that same area. And, it's just a volatile part of the world. And we also have a unit, our military police company, that will be going to Kosovo for the K4 mission. They leave soon. And then we have between the 108th and the 177th Fighter Wing, their airmen they go all over. So they're supporting combatant commands in every area of operations, around the globe right now. We deploy a little bit different on the air side, where you might have smaller groups or two or three airmen falling in on another mission somewhere, but they are in some very dangerous parts of the world as well. And it just reminds you that, whether it be Guard, active, or reserve, all services, that we have America's sons and daughters in harm's way. And when we look at some of the things happening here at home, I think if people thought about that more, then maybe we could work through some of the things that we get all hung up on.
Yeah.
And we could work through it probably a little more quickly.
So it's safe to say that that New Jersey is spread across the globe at the moment.
They are, and I think in line with it. We have such a rich tradition of military history here in New Jersey. You come here, to this battleship. The battleship is so decorated, but then you look at the monuments and memorials across the state, and you read about the stories of those who have garnered some of the highest awards. And a lot of, for such a small state, we have a lot of heroes. And, I attribute that to the grit of the New Jersey. And so it's a very, very, what we're doing now is in line with what we've always done, back to the Civil War.
You're totally right about that. When we had our conversation earlier, an earlier episode with Congressman Norcross, he told me something I didn't even realize, which was that there are 3 Medal of Honor winners from Audubon, New Jersey, which is a small little town of a couple thousand people in Camden County.
Wow.
Is the highest, I guess, per capita number of Medal of Honor winners from the same town.
Wow.
3 people and from a small town like Audubon. And it's just goes to show our unique history here in New Jersey. And then I was privileged to serve on the John Basselon, USS John Basselon Commissioning Committee late last year. Our, of course, Gunnery Sergeant Basselon, our New Jersey native, Medal of Honor, Navy Cross winner from the Pacific Theater in World War II. So, and of course, the Guard's been around even longer than us as a country. So, a tremendous amount of history here, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well.
Operating engineers are the men and women that move mountains. And the Engineers Labor Employer Cooperative, ELAC, puts them to work. They create opportunities for the men, women, and union signatory contractors of Local 825. Repaving our roads, keeping our homes bright and warm, and even building our favorite team stadium. We understand infrastructure. That's why ELAC and Local 825 are ready to get to work.
Through the DoD's state partnership program, New Jersey has a very unique relationship with a couple other countries' military, namely the Republic of Albania and the Republic of Cyprus. And just a few days ago, the battleship had the privilege of welcoming you and the new defense chief from the Republic of Cyprus. Can you tell us a little bit about these sort of unique opportunities that the Guard has and how you're liaisoning with foreign militaries?
Yeah, absolutely. So Albania, we've been a partner with them, I think coming up on 25 years in January. So we will celebrate that milestone with them. But the goal of the state partnership program is to, forge these relationships with these countries and so that on our worst day, it is not the first time, just like at home with partnerships, it is not, the first time that we meet someone. It's also to increase their capacity to defend and serve in their own countries. And it allows us to help with advancing the national security goals of the United States and leverage those relationships across, Albania, again, we've deployed alongside them. New Jersey Guardsmen I think 5 times we have deployed with them over the years. Wow. And so making sure that one, they can communicate and have the same type of training, professional development, because for us in the United States, our enlisted personnel, they are the backbone of the military. And I think that is, it's something that we're able to help them with and utilize that, that construct within their militaries to make them more effective. And so we help them with the professional development, and we're now moving into, working with different things with cybersecurity because, like you said, that impacts everything. We were actually last year there, we were over in Albania doing an engagement and a real world need happened. And so our airmen, they responded and they received kudos from the Secretary of Defense, Austin, back at the time for their work and assisting with, with that mission. And so we were so proud of that, and but for our SPP program and that engagement, I'm not sure, and I know we would have responded to it, but to have them in place and ready to go is significant. And then, Cyprus is a newer partnership, and I think we're coming up on 3 years here soon with them. And the Chief of Defense, they are charged with the mission of firefighting in Cyprus. And so while we have that capability and we assist here, it's not our primary mission, but we assist. We're able through our military relationship to introduce them to some of our civilian partners as well, to talk about that mission, how how to mitigate that. And the ambassador there in Cyprus, she's a former Navy officer. Okay. And so the Chief of Defense, he went to the gift shop afterwards and he got her some trinkets and he said, I have to get a picture out here for her to send it to her.
I love that.
He said they go back and forth, their rival with the Navy and the Air Force. I think it reminds us that we're all the same, and we're all, in terms of our commitment to our respective nations and also to a commitment of excellence. And, so these engagements, and they are important for our airmen and soldiers as well, so that they can work alongside folks from different nations and help them in ways that they wouldn't be otherwise. And so we're so proud of the work they do. And we're fortunate to have such great partners in Albania and Cyprus.
And I noticed, I saw, I guess, a picture, maybe it was the next day or a couple of days later, you were down at the Pentagon with him, with the chief of the National Guard Bureau.
Yes. So, and that's so we started there.
We started there. Okay.
Yeah. So we met with General Nordhaus, which General Nordhaus, be the chief of National Guard. He invites the tag from the respective states, like when a chief of defense is going to come to visit at the Pentagon, which is, that hasn't happened in the past. And so we certainly appreciate General Nordhaus's leadership on that. And it allows us to sit as a team with him as the 4-star and the chief of the National Guard Bureau sitting next, I get to sit next to him and we have a conversation with the chief of defense and offer our commitment to them. And so it's a powerful message for us as a military. But then coming here and showing him around New Jersey and bringing him here. I mean, it was such a great way to kind of round out the entire trip. So thank you for hosting us.
We're very, very honored to be your host. As I mentioned earlier, and we talked about it a few minutes ago, you're not just the Adjutant General, you're also the Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs here in New Jersey. Undoubtedly a unique role for a uniformed military member to have that sort of dual position. Includes everything from the 3 veterans homes, the Doyle Cemetery, the various veteran services offices, the transitional housing facilities that you mentioned, and even more than that. I know just over a year ago, the governor made a promise, I think it was in his State of the State address, that in the next year, all 21 counties would finally have a veteran service office. I know we've now completed that, which is just fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about that and what sort of goes on at the day-to-day of those offices and how veterans can utilize them for their needs?
Absolutely. So we did complete that, and we were so proud to get it done. It was not an easy task. So it was more than just finding locations. So once we found a location, then you have to be on the state network and, so all of those different things. And we were able to overcome that because of the support that we get in the community of where we house many of those offices. And the people who work in those offices bringing in people and giving access in places where it wasn't previously has been a game changer for our veterans who live in rural communities, or even right here in Camden, we didn't have an office. And there are so many veterans who live within the city. Having the capacity to do that has been a game changer for those veterans. And it allows us to do outreach in places where we weren't before. When veterans come in with whatever they need, if it is to file a claim, if it is they're looking for a job, if they need help, if they need access to resources, we provide that information and that assistance and those referrals. But I think one of the most significant things is their ability to help them with claims. And I think to date, we're back since July, $86 million in initial benefit, for federal funds that are going into the pockets of our veterans.
Can you say that number again? I want to make sure that gets out.
$86 million.
$86 million.
And that's the first month benefit. So it's a life-changing thing for a veteran who files a claim, gets rated, and then starts to receive a disability check or whatever service they need. So it is life-changing. And so to be able to do that good work in every county and have them available is just, Governor Murphy, he absolutely put the money where his mouth was in that and many other things. But we could not have done that without his commitment and his mandate to make sure that we were making our services available across the entire state.
I think it's just an unfortunate reality that most veterans don't really know what they're entitled to. And then secondary to that, once they do know if they're entitled to it, they don't know how to get it.
Absolutely.
And that's why I just think it's all that more important that there is a place in everyone's area in the state that they can go and do that. And certainly they have that opportunity now from here in Camden all the way up the more rural parts of our state, up in Warren and Sussex counties,
Yes.
and everywhere in between. It's in a very important part of certainly what the department does on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add to that. If you served for 1 year, if you served for 3 years, you are a veteran. And so there's the federal definition, and then the state definition is different.
Right.
But if you put this uniform on ever, you're a veteran. And I think it amazes me if I'm out shopping and you get to talking to someone and it's like, oh yeah, I served. And, it's like, are you taking advantage of your benefits? Since I only served for 2 years, like, you're a veteran. Right. And that is, I think, our biggest challenge. And so having boots on the ground in every county, it is great, but we need help telling that story. And so if you run into somebody and they are a veteran, encourage them to check with a veteran service officer and find out what they're entitled to, and I'm amazed that so many people don't know, and they've served and they just don't know that there is something that they're entitled to. It's not a handout. It's something that they've earned.
And even more, especially for our Vietnam veterans as well.
For sure. Yes.
I'm a big believer in mentorship and the role that it plays in people's lives. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our sort of joint mentor, our late friend, Colonel Al Bunning, my fun uncle, as I used to call him, a real mentor to me in my sort of formidable years, a mentor to you throughout your career. What advice do you have for young service members who are aspiring to maybe take that next step, take on a leadership role in the Guard or just in any of the service branches, or just as to your point, who's someone who comes out enlisted and maybe wants to become an officer? What do you have to say to sort of young folks who are just coming into these roles but looking on to take more of be a leader and take a leadership role?
Yeah. So, and you're right. Colonel Bunting, he was a friend. He was your fun uncle. He would, as
There's a
our,
lot of people's fun uncles.
yes, yes. And for me, he would say, he would either tell me he was calling in an official capacity or as my big brother.
Yeah.
And I am so thankful for that relationship. I was scared to death of him as a second lieutenant because he was so demanding and he would accept nothing, but excellence. And if you didn't get it right, he would be, not so kind and telling you to do it again. And, but I'm thankful for the way that he pushed me, as a young officer. And, anytime I protested or I said, what if this or what if that? And one of the things that he told me, he was like, do your job. Other people will advocate for you. Do your job. And, and so I said, oh, okay. He said, do whatever it is you're doing, do that. And I think so if I could offer advice, whether it's in the military or their schooling or, a civilian job, do your job, be the best at it. You don't have to go self-promote. You don't have to, go and try to pave a way. Someone else is always watching and they will do that for you. They're going to do it for you if you don't do your job or if you do it. So he would say, do your job, know what you're doing, be sure about your decision, make a decision and do it, execute on it. And, yeah, he is, I miss him a lot. I think that other than my mom and dad, I think he was as invested in my success. The times when I experienced disappointment in my career, he was disappointed, not in me, but disappointed for me. And I miss him quite a bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he was just as hard on you, I think, as he was on me as a 13 or 14-year-old, and email exchanges and asking me why I'm doing it this way instead of another way. And Colonel B, I'm not in the military. I'm just a kid. But I got the treatment. But I tell you though, it was helpful for me because I was a young kid and I happened to be around a lot of military people at the time, and but it helped sort of shape my perspective going forward. And I don't know that maybe I wouldn't be doing this job if it sort of wasn't for some of the influence that he had on my life and some of the other mentors that I've had throughout my career. So, no, it's certainly, he is certainly missed. You're no stranger to us at the Battleship. Not only did you receive our 2025 Admiral Halsey Award this year for military service, but as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, you joined us last year on that very brisk day in March for the ship's send-off. And then came on a very hot day a few weeks later to actually walk under the ship and join us in the dry dock for a dry dock tour. What were your impressions of walking under the nation's most decorated battleship?
Yeah, so one, again, thank you for the honor of the Halsey Award. I mean, highlight of my year. I mean, it's I will never forget that. And I was able to share that with my husband and my daughter that evening. And, so yes, so thank you. Thank you for that. I will tell you when we said we were going to come down and, walk under the ship, and I was like, how do you even get under like the ship, and I knew it was in dry dock, but I had no idea of you can't appreciate the size of this ship. And then to be just on the surface, but then to walk down the long flight of stairs to
50 feet
up under it. It's amazing to me I guess how orchestrating that whole process, because it is definitely, one thing had to happen so that another thing could happen. and it kind of all worked together. And then I think when you were explaining to us about the paint,
Yes.
about the layers of paint, like, you just never really give thought that, the paint actually, the different colors, they
Yes.
have a purpose. And but it's so when you think about the architects and the engineers and how they think of all of these different things that go into crafting a vessel such as this, it's
Built in 1940.
yes,
Yes, by hand.
yes,
Yes.
which is unbelievable. And the fact that it could only be dry docked here because of,
Yeah.
the size and of it. It's just, it's really amazing. It's that, and that then it will actually float. And
Yeah.
that's like anything this big can actually stay above the water, with all the stuff that you put onto it. But yeah, so a great undertaking for you and the foundation. So, and I know it doesn't happen, by itself, but to even conceive it and then to pull all the people together, all the resources to make it happen, man, I know you probably couldn't have been happier when it was done.
Yes, it was, as we said, the weeks were short, but the days were long. And, the first time we did that as a museum and not having any active duty Navy folks on our team here and just trying to figure it all out. It was certainly a gigantic undertaking, but we were so pleased with the way that the project just came through. And of course, just when we first got under the ship for the first time and we drained all the water out of the dock and saw the condition of the hull for the first time, and by first time anyone's put their eyes on the hull in 35 years, and to be in the condition that it was, because we're here in the Delaware and in the freshwater and the saltwater, and just the difference that has on the whole. I've certainly learned a lot. I didn't know anything about dry docking a battleship going into this, but you figure it out. And you trust your team, and it was really just a terrific experience. Last year was also another great year for USS New Jersey's everywhere. And DMAVA played a really instrumental role in supporting us at the commissioning committee for our sister ship, as I mentioned, the new USS New Jersey, since 796, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine, the third Navy vessel to have the name of the Garden State. Our motto at the commissioning committee was best commissioning ever. From everything I witnessed and the feedback that was given to me, I think we sort of met the mark as having the greatest commissioning in the submarine forces history. And that's a lot of thanks to DMAVA and certainly to Governor Murphy and our partners in the legislature. I know you're not in the Navy, you're in the Air Force, but you're a Jersey person. How cool is it to finally have a new USS New Jersey back in the active fleet?
Yeah, it is awesome. And I will tell you too, like I said earlier about our rich tradition and our long history of service, it just extends that across, all the components. And so to see that New Jersey name, that is when you look back on the history of this vessel, and then like we were talking about the number of people who have won some of our highest awards for service, to know that legacy, there'll be somebody else sitting here talking about that, having this kind of a conversation, when you and I have moved on to, more relaxed lifestyle, I might say. But yeah, I think it speaks to like the commitment of our state, from the highest levels, from the governor to this legislature. And I think that will carry forward. And we do nothing without them, and them understanding how important it is for us to contribute to our nation's defense, and we all have skin in the game. And so it just makes you walk a little taller, makes sure, you stick your chest out. Again, to put this uniform on is a privilege. And it's just one more reminder, especially where we are in our world's history, that we are a part of something that's so significant, so important. And to say that we were a part of it, when you're talking to your grandchildren, and, it's like, I was there, I did, I was a part of that. It's a point of pride, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We're a museum here at the Battleship, obviously, but one of the things that you have at the National Guard, you also have a museum, two museums, the National Guard Militia Museum at Seagard and also at the Lawrenceville Armory. And you've got some pretty cool stuff there. And I know I've seen a bunch of it. Can you tell us a little bit about the museums that the Guard has and that they operate?
Yes, and the museum that's right in Lawrenceville, it's an annex, and but the number of schools that go through there is amazing. And the people who volunteer, they're all volunteers, much like you have here. I'm always so encouraged by the people who are willing to come back and give, and making sure our young people and older people like me understand our history and understand how people have given of themselves. And so the museum in Lawrenceville is a little bit smaller, but there's so much history, and it's so interesting, and it's almost like a please touch experience, because when you go in and you're able to see the uniforms, or you see the equipment that has been used over the years, and you kind of get a feel for what was given and how people served. And, just when you look at there's different flight suits and different, letters and things like that, it reminds us just how much has been given to make sure we can live how we live. And then the same out at Seeger, it is larger, and they have some of the nicer displays. They have a little more room out there, but it is worth a trip, to go to visit that, to see what New Jersey has given to this nation, to the state and nation. And you just might see some names that you recognize because they harness like the things from people who had served. And so you go through and it's like, I know that person. Or I've heard of them. They've been in our lifetime. So it is a great collection of memorabilia that we've collected over the years of those who've served in this organization.
That's great. I mean, great that students and that schools are taking advantage of field trips to the museum. I mean, I think we're on track to have our largest year ever in the history of our organization in terms of student groups. You probably heard them above your head stomping around this morning. And we also sort of view ourselves as a please touch. I think in a lot of other type of museums, especially museum ships, you go into rooms and things are, sort of behind plexiglass and things like that. And here we have some of that, but not a lot of it. And we want people to come and touch things and experience it the way, a sailor would have when this ship was in service. And so it's great to see that the museum that the Guard in DMAVA has is thriving. As I mentioned, one of the things that we are doing at this podcast is not just highlighting the battleship and our veterans, but our uniformed military leaders in New Jersey. A few episodes ago, we had a really great conversation with Captain Smith Brewski, the CO at Naval Weapons Station Earl. We plan on having similar conversations with folks from the Joint Base and some of our Coast Guard commanders as well. Something that's stood out to me, and it sort of harkens back to something you were talking about a little earlier when we were talking to Captain Smith, and he's not from New Jersey. He's an Iowa boy, if I recall. And he just talked about, even being in Wawa when someone's, a teenager or somebody, sees him in uniform, and sort of the deference and the reverence that they would give to that. Whereas, you're in a lot of other places and probably teenagers are looking to move away from people with sort of authority looking figures, but it's almost the exact opposite here in New Jersey. And we plan on highlighting that here on this podcast and at the Battleship. And so New Jersey is home to, a massive active duty reserve component, National Guard population. What is it, as the leader of this organization, what do you want the public to better understand about the men and women who are serving in our National Guard now, and, the role the sort of outsized role that I like to say that New Jersey has in our, entire sort of force posture here on this side of the country?
So I think if they take away anything, is that the people you see in the National Guard, they're going to run into active component, they're going to run into reserves. But the folks that serve in the National Guard, they're your neighbors. They don't leave, they don't go to a different duty station, that they live in the community that they serve in. And I think that's what makes us unique, from our, our active brothers and sisters, is that this is it. Like we are, we live here. And so when we're responding to domestic operations or, during COVID, anything within the state, that many of the people that they interact with, they're from that community. And so if people are suffering, many times their own families are suffering, but they are out serving the greater good for New Jersey. And as you see them in that role, understand that they have that same commitment to their civilian job and also to our federal mission. And so be encouraged that the people that you see and that are serving within the National Guard, that they are people who have values, people who are committed to making the state a better place. And for moms and dads and, people raising children to encourage their children in a life of service. You don't have to stay for 40 years, but I wholeheartedly believe that any young person who serves in the military, certainly in the Guard, because you can serve and go to school or serve and work, but to serve, it gives them a different perspective on the world and their responsibility in it. There are many other ways to do that, but I believe that if you've ever put on the uniform and you have been in the military, it's a club, it's like less than 1% of the, of people who could serve. And so it is a small group of people in the world. And it's an experience that not everybody will have, but it is an experience that once you've done it, it permeates your life in every relationship for the rest of your life in a positive way. So I think if they take away anything is that, while we're not perfect, we have issues just like everybody else, but our commitment to our fellow man, whether it be in the state or across the globe, that makes us who we are. It makes this nation what it is, and that they are really the best of what we have in this country. And just to be encouraged by that.
I mean, you mentioned that these are, especially when it comes to National Guard, these are people who are here in our community. And so when we talk about deploying 1,500 guardsmen here or a couple here or all over the country, or people who are being sort of taken out of their daily lives, it's not different from, active duty, that this is what they're doing. This is where they know they're going to be. They get called up, they get orders, and they go. And it's just and I just want to say that because it's, just all that more important to make sure that we're, supporting the families behind our soldiers and airmen who are here back home, taking care of business and moving on with their daily lives while their loved one is deployed. So supporting family readiness groups and things like that, which we've certainly done in the past, is tremendously important as well. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. This podcast is the Wetsu podcast. Wetsu was the rallying cry of our last skipper, Admiral Ron Tucker. We eat this stuff up, or something a little bit more than that. But basically what it means is sort of doing grueling work with a smile on your face. Mm-hmm. Are there any particular sort of Wetsu type moments that sort of come to mind to you from your time in uniform?
Yes. And we talked about it, or you mentioned it earlier when you talked about this being the highest operations tempo. And I will say, that's when we are just, it's firing on all cylinders, because when people are engaged in doing their jobs, that's why they put on the uniform, so they can go and do their craft, whatever part of the mission that you have. And so when we're busy, I find that our airmen and our soldiers are more engaged, and they're ready to go. And so, while peace is the goal, when we're called to respond, just after 9/11 or, COVID and the civil unrest, you name it, that's when we're operating, at the pace of the need. And not only those of us in uniform, but also the community. And so when you see that all happening, it's one thing when you exercise different things, but then when you see it all come together and you say, we eat this up. And we have one of the mottos that we use, local to global. So whatever it is, we start out here at home, and then we'll take the fight wherever we need to. And when we're doing that, you see there you have less issues of any kind, throughout the ranks, because people are so engaged in doing their job. There are times you step back and you just say, man, this is pretty cool. I couldn't think of anything better to have done with my life in terms of a career. And I still have to pinch myself to say, I'm a part of that. Like, I'm a part of this rich history. They'll write in the history books, and we'll be able to go back and say, you know what, I was a part of that. So yeah, that's a great saying. I think it's a family broadcast, so we can't what we do.
That's great. Brigadier General Yvonne L, the Adjutant General of New Jersey. It's truly honored and privileged to have you with us today. Thank you not only for your decades of distinguished service to our state and our country, but your leadership of our 8,400 citizen airmen and soldiers in the New Jersey National Guard, their dedication to protecting our freedoms at home and abroad, as we've learned about today, I think sort of reflects on the strength of your command and our state. And we're grateful for all that you do. We're grateful for your support of the battleship, and we thank you for joining us on Wetsu.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for the great work that you and your team do here at the battleship.
Thank you.
Operating engineers are the men and women that move mountains. And the Engineers Labor Employer Cooperative, ELAC, puts them to work. They create opportunities for the men, women, and union signatory contractors of Local 825. Repaving our roads, keeping our homes bright and warm, and even building our favorite team stadium. We understand infrastructure. That's why ELAC and Local 825 are ready to get to work.